Dargon, near death, is rescued by Dragonflyer, who carries the weakened hero.
For our latest RetroBlasting restoration, I thought we'd do something we haven't talked about on RetroBlasting at all. Sectaurs from Coleco. They were made in 1984, and it was the epic story or struggle of Dargon and his insect warriors versus the evil Spydrax as they both attempted to control the Hyve. These toys were toys I did not have as a child. It might have had something to do with the fact that I didn't like bugs, but secretly I kind of wanted them because they were really neat. They were hand puppets that allowed your fingers to be the legs of the bugs, and then you sort of controlled the head with one finger, and the wings would flap electronically. And so what I wanted to do was get a few of them for the archive, and I found two. I found the two main ones, the Spider-Flyer, which is Spydrax's evil vehicle bug, and then the Dragonflyer, which is Dargon, the hero's dragonfly. When I got them, the seller had told me the wing flapping mechanisms no longer work. Now these two particular toys were the only ones in the line, if I recall, that had the automated wings flapping feature. There were some other characters that had like ground bugs and things that had different action features, but these were the two main ones. This was kind of the Battle Cat and Panther of Sectaurs. So what I thought I'd do is look into these and see if I could get their wings flapping again. When I first got them, I first worked on Spydrax to see if I could get it working. And the Spider-Flyer is now flapping its wings. You might have seen that video that we made on the Facebook page. And that reminds me, if you are interested in our upcoming restorations and you want to know what we're doing next, we have a lot of little exclusive video clips that we post to our Facebook page. So if you haven't followed that, follow it and you'll get some interesting exclusive previews of our next projects. But I got the Spider-Flyer working, and so then it was time to move on to the Dragonflyer. But it was a complex process working with the Spider-Flyer, so I wanted to document this as a restoration for everybody, because my understanding is that a lot of these toys don't have flapping wings anymore. Something's gone wrong in the mechanism. And I think I figured out what it is, and it's very simple to fix. The difficulty is actually getting into the toy to get to the motor. So let's get started doing some disassembly, and you'll see the process. The first step in disassembling these bugs is you want to put yourself into a mindset of patience, because there are a ton of screws and they're all integral to its construction, but you also don't want to miss one and then try and force the halves apart, because then you're going to break the whole toy. The first stage, of course, is assessing the electronics compartment. The electronics compartment is located underneath the back of the bug. So you just pull this compartment off and you look inside. We've already tested it with batteries. We know it's not working. However, thankfully, for both of these, there's no corrosion. If there was some corrosion, what you'd want to do is you'd want to douse the electronic connections in vinegar or Coca-Cola, something to try and get the corrosion off. We don't have that problem. However, because it's not working, the first thing I want to do is use the tip of a pencil eraser to try and clean off the already relatively clean connections. Before I go to emery cloth, I just want to try this and see. More than likely what's happened is the motor itself has seized over time and just needs to be manually operated. But just while I'm in here, I'm just going to use the tip of a pencil eraser and get this clean. It will actually remove minor oxidation from contacts. It's a great way to avoid having to use abrasive methods. So the next step in doing this process is getting the glove off. You don't want to rip the glove because that's part of the novelty of the Sectaurs toy. So we start with the screw that's under the jaw. Always be careful, don't force anything, you don't want to strip any screws. Hold the head of the bug carefully, and then with pressure, just turn gently, because you don't want to strip the screw head. When you remove the middle finger of the glove, you'll notice that there is a plastic washer that's hanging on inside the glove, the fingertip. You want to leave that there if you can. It will come out, but you don't want to lose it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to screw this back onto the chin, and that's what controls the head movement of the bug when you've got it on display. So make sure that that washer stays in there. It probably will because there's been 30 years of pressure keeping it there. So just be mindful of that. The next screws that you're going to want to undo are a little more tricky. You pull the finger out through the bracing, this bracing mount right here, and then you'll uncover one of the two screws for the mounting plate for the glove. The other screw is on the other side underneath. So these are the two screws that come off next. Alright, as you can see, the glove comes away very easily. We'll just set that over here. Now at this point, this is when the body of the bug has to come apart. And this is where it gets a little trickier, but you just want to, like I said, maintain your patience. First thing we'll do is we'll remove this mounting plate. It has two screws on either side. This mounting plate is actually serving a dual purpose. It also keeps the saddle on the Dragonflyer. So when you remove this, the saddle will come off. Okay. Don't want to lose our screws. And now, the saddle should come off. Alright, so the seat has come off. Okay, so those are the first two screws for separating it. This piece will not come off yet, so don't force it. You have three screws right here. These are the last three screws that we need to undo, and this Dragonflyer should come apart. If a screw doesn't want to come out after you've undone it, don't force it, just move on to the next screw, because more than likely it'll pull away easily with the rest of the structure. Alright, at this point the halves have loosened. And as you can see, the assembly comes out with the lower half, leaving the upper half on its own. One of the great things about Sectaurs that I've discovered upon doing these restorations is that you don't have to completely reassemble the toy before you test the battery compartment. A lot of times with some of these toys, you kind of have to reassemble the whole toy to get the batteries to place properly so that you can test the motor. But in this case, everything is self-contained in the lower half of the toy. So you can actually test the motor while it's exposed and continue to work with it until you get it rolling again. You'll notice right here, this is the switch, and it has a little mounting bracket that I'll show you in close-up. And you always want to make sure that when we reassemble this, that mounting bracket is in the right place before you put the halves back on. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this engine hasn't seized. These are the main gears, and they operate the wing mechanisms. You can probably see them moving up and down as I operate the wings manually. We want this engine to work on its own. It's a very clean battery compartment, and I cleaned it off a little bit with that pencil eraser. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold this in place, flip it over, put our batteries in, positives toward the back. And now I'm going to flip this switch and see if I can't get this thing going again. Okay, you see there's nothing happening. But if I operate it and kickstart it, suddenly it's working again. It just hasn't operated in a long time. That's all we had to do was get in there and just turn it a little bit with our finger. But that's why so many of these probably aren't working anymore. It's not that they're actually broken. They've just seized up, and you can't easily get in there to turn it. It's kind of like an old Model T where you crank the front of the engine with the handle to get it running. So we're going to let this run for a few minutes to really let this engine get going. As you can hear, it's getting faster and faster because it's finally loosening up after so many years. The Dragonflyer is more of a pain in the butt to get back together than the Spider Flyer because of this band here that keeps this back piece of fur on the bug. it crosses right next to a major screw hole for the saddle. So you want to make sure that when you're lining that up with these, that you don't actually allow this to go over the screw hole, because otherwise you're going to be punching a screw through this piece of nylon, and you really don't want to do that. So just carefully make sure that those holes are aligned first. Make sure that your switch is lining up properly on the side here, because you want that to align properly. Looks like we've done that. Test the switch to make sure it's properly backstopped. Alright, we're solid. So the first step will now be to put the halves back together so that we can then reassemble the glove. So here's the mounting plate on the underside of the glove. We're going to carefully align this back up with the bug. And then we're going to start with, I start with the backmost screw, because that's the last one that I removed. You don't want to over tighten screws on old toys. You just want to make sure that they feel snug, give it another quarter turn, and then you're done. Because otherwise you could strip the channel that it's in, you could crack the plastic housing around it. That's with any vintage toy. You don't have to over torque it. This isn't like, repairing a car. Especially given that we're all collectors now. Unless you're not telling me something and you actually are still playing with it like you did when you were 5, and I'm not judging you if you are, but it does kind of put everything at risk. Now that's interesting. One of these screws is markedly thicker than the others. So I'm going to have to be careful and make sure that I didn't put a screw in the wrong place. That larger screw, I ended up putting it at the back because there was a thinner screw in there that was spinning, and the larger screw fit into the very backmost screw hole. So if you run into that with your Sectaurs and you find a screw that's actually thicker than the others and you can't remember where it went, I would put it on the backmost screw hole. Make sure you thread this finger through the mounting bracket, and then line it up with the jaw of the Dragonflyer. And then it is a pill to get this one back in there. Sometimes you have to kind of hand start it. Sometimes it doesn't want to go. Alright, so now we do a little test. It's working. Now we move on to the wings.